Move that the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 37 of 2023, be moved. Be read for the first time, Mr. Speaker. For the second time.
Senator Osotsi, I can see you're struggling with this particular matter. Would you wish to recollect yourself and then come back? Because that is not how I know Senator Osotsi. This is a different Senator Osotsi I'm seeing today.
Mr. Speaker, you have guided me.
Okay, proceed.
I will proceed.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 37 of 2023, be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, this bill is born out from the experience as the chair of the County Public Investment and Special Funds Committee, where we have been having challenges with the witnesses appearing before us, particularly county governors appearing before us. We have had occasions where our programming has been affected hugely because of non-appearance by the witnesses and sometimes late request to postpone. And this has happened severally. Mr. Speaker, I therefore decided to seek for this amendment so that we can try and resolve this problem. So the bill that I'm presenting before this House, Mr. Speaker, seeks to enhance the oversight mandate of Parliament to as the representative of the people of Kenya, guided by Article 1 of the Constitution on supremacy of the people of Kenya, that Parliament has the powers to summon anyone to appear before it. This bill is also guided by Article 125 of the Constitution that gives Parliament the powers to summon any person. The key word there is any person in the exercise of its oversight role. Mr. Speaker, this bill is also guided by Article 50 of the Constitution that talks about fair hearing of the witnesses that appear before Parliament. If I may go to the depth of the bill, Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to amend Section 19 and 33 of Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act to provide a mechanism by which an order of arrest may be executed by Parliament itself. Mr. Speaker, we have had scenarios where some witnesses who have been summoned by various committees to appear have decided not to appear. A case in point is the governors in the last Senate who never appeared before parliamentary committees. And Parliament issued summons, those summons were ignored, and the police could not enforce those summons. So, Mr. Speaker, then that puts Parliament in a very dangerous situation. That yes, your standing orders provides for the summoning of witnesses, but you do not have the powers to arrest. So what do? If the Inspector General of Police refuses to arrest, what does Parliament do? I remember at some point, Mr. Speaker, some senators, I think maybe in the third Senate or second Senate, were forced to go to the office of the Inspector General to find out what was happening, because all the summons that were issued were not being enforced by the police. So this bill seeks to give Parliament the powers to arrest in a situation where the police are not able to do that for one reason or another. Mr. Speaker, the Inspector General of Police, who is also the head of the National Police Service, this bill gives him the power to the specific provision to help in the arrest. But also, it also goes ahead and says a member of staff duly authorized by the Speaker or the clerk can do that. Mr. Speaker, I know in the last Parliament there was a proposal to amend the Parliamentary Service Act so that we can have a unit of police in this House. But that has not been implemented, Mr. Speaker. So in this case, this bill will give us the option that in the event the Inspector General of Police is not able to enforce our summon through arrest, then we can do it ourselves through the direction of the Speaker or the clerk. And Mr. Speaker, this is important because if we don't do that, we will reach a point where people will not come to our committees. We will issue summons and they will not come, and they will collude with the police and they will never come. And that has happened before in this House. And we will be a toothless House that cannot bite. So this bill gives us more teeth so that the people who don't appear before us, we are able to follow the law, follow our standing orders, and arrest them. I know issues have been raised about when you arrest them, so what? Mr. Speaker, I think that is an issue that can be looked at administratively by this House. But the power to arrest, it is very important that we should have it. Mr. Speaker, the bill goes further to say that the fines that we usually charge, those who don't honor our summons, we usually charge 5,000 shillings. But this bill proposes that that amount is too low, we increase it to 2 million shillings. And that money, in the case of an individual fails to appear before us, should be paid by that person, not by the county government or by that institution where that person is heading. So, Mr. Speaker, this will be a bigger pain to them because most of them have been coming. You tell them about 500 and they easily pay it. But, Mr. Speaker, if we enhance the fine to 2 million shillings, I think that will be a heavy burden to them, and the cost of not appearing before Senate or before National Assembly will be higher. So people will be compelled to appear before us. Mr. Speaker, this bill, though someone may argue that it is too punitive, but the bill provides that the process will be fair. And the provisions of Article 50 will be followed. Mr. Speaker, I think we must appreciate one thing. The Constitution gives this House immense powers under Article 125 to summon everyone under the sun. Everyone under the sun, including even the President. This House has the powers to summon anyone to appear before this House. And if for any one reason that person does not come, after several invitations as per our standing orders, and we issue summons, we have the powers to go further than that and arrest that person to come before us. If the police are not able to do that, we are going to have the powers to have a higher fine. In fact, some people told me that this 2 million is still too low. We should have increased it to maybe 5 million or even 10 million, so that the people can see the pain. Mr. Speaker, you will agree with me that the basis of this amendment is to protect the supremacy of Parliament. Is to protect the supremacy of Parliament. It is very disappointing that our committees work so hard. They invite witnesses, and witnesses just decide to stay at home, not to appear before us.
Yes, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, Senator, if you could yield. I raise understanding order number 105. The senator is articulating a very important issue. He has told us, Mr. Speaker, that if the police refuse to arrest, we arrest ourselves. Mr. Speaker, could you substantiate so that we understand what he means? Is it that the sergeant at arms will arrest, or the members of the committee will go and arrest, or the chairman? We just want to be clear as we support you, because we need these people to come before us. Could you clarify?
Senator Boni.
Yes.
Senator Sotsi is yet to conclude his moving remarks. If you could be a little bit patient, maybe those concerns will be addressed before he concludes. Kindly proceed, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, I think my good brother, Senator Boni, knows that even the citizens have powers to arrest. That's why we have citizens arrest. But in this case, I will kindly ask him to read the bill, because the bill is proposing that the clerk and or the speaker may cause the arrest of these witnesses. It is in the bill. So I ask you to read the bill, which you get more details about it. Mr. Speaker, the Powers and Privilege Act is a very important instrument for this House, because it helps us to perform our duties, and it is an act that, if we really want to enhance the powers of this House, it is an act where we need to go and seek amendments. I am aware Senator Mugatana has proposed amendment to this act as well, to try and make sure that the resolutions we make in this House are implemented by the relevant agencies. This particular amendment, Mr. Speaker, it is going to enhance that. It is going to enhance our powers. We are not the ones who are going to arrest, but the institution of Parliament is going to do that, under the Speaker or the Clerk, as per the Act. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to belabor this, because this is a very small bill, to ask the members to support this bill, and this bill will make our work here very productive, because the current scenario, it is a scenario that it is very annoying, very frustrating, and very demeaning to this House, where witnesses are invited and they refuse to come. And if the police don't take any action, we are incapacitated, we can't do much. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move, and I ask my good friend, the Senator of Nairobi, Edwin Sifuna, to second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the bill. Mr. Speaker, I am privileged to serve in 3 very powerful committees of this House. One of them is the Senate Energy Committee. Mr. Speaker, following the incident at Mradi in Embakasi East a few days ago, we as the Senate Energy Committee determined that we needed to speak to those who are responsible for the licensing of installations such as those that caused the tragedy in Embakasi East. And we started by inviting the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, Mr. Davis Chirchir, to appear before our committee this morning. Mr. Speaker, needless to say, I arrived at the venue of the meeting on time, together with my colleagues, the Chairman, Honorable Matinga, the Senator of Nyeri, together with the Member of Parliament for Embakasi East, Honorable Babu Owino. Mr. Speaker, we were shocked to be notified that a letter was dispatched to the committee last night, the 13th of February, that the Cabinet Secretary was out of the country, and that is all we were told. Of course, even though invitations were extended to the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, there was no mention of whether they were in the country or whether they even received our communication or anything. There was nobody from EPRA. There was nobody from the county government of Nairobi. So we were seated there, Mr. Speaker, looking like people who don't have work to do, with no witnesses to appear before us. Mr. Speaker, I also serve in the Senate Transport and Housing Committee, which is chaired very ably by the Senator for Kiambu. Mr. Speaker, you know that this thing called affordable housing is all the rage in the country right now. There is no county in Nairobi, in Kenya currently, where there are more proposed housing developments than Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, as we speak in this county, we have earmarked 13 county government estates, the old city council estates, for redevelopment. Mr. Speaker, you would expect that in a county such as this, where projects of that magnitude are happening, robust conversation is had with the county government of Nairobi and with the citizens and the residents of the affected areas, so that when this project is done, I will not stand here again and read a report similar to the one our committee read on the Buxton project in Mombasa. Would you believe it, Mr. Speaker, that even after writing invitations, summons to the county governor of Nairobi, Honorable Sakaja, on 5 different instances, Governor Sakaja has refused, failed, and or neglected to appear before the Housing Committee of the Senate. People, the residents of these estates, they come very early to our committees because these committees offer hope, a channel for them to be heard. If you listen to the leadership of Afa Jericho, one of the estates, Mr. Speaker, they have never been listened to by the county government. What the county government calls public participation, in the view of the residents of Jericho, is not public participation. They have never been consulted on this project. And yet, Mr. Speaker, they are the ones who are supposed to cede their land that they have lived on for years, even before some of us were born, for this project to go ahead. And yet, when we summon the county governor, he doesn't appear. So what are we supposed to do as members of the committee and senators in this House? Which is why, Mr. Speaker, I want to very strongly urge our colleagues in this House. This is a frustration we all go through in our committees and even in this House. Mr. Speaker, I also serve in the Senate Business Committee. We sit down, we receive questions for cabinet secretaries from our colleagues, and we are at pains to schedule these questions because we can see that many of the cabinet secretaries will at times send word to the Speaker a day before they are scheduled to appear before this House that they are not coming to appear. I was looking at the schedule of questions yesterday. Some of the questions, Mr. Speaker, relate to matters that are long gone. Even if the CS appeared now, it will not be a current conversation to have in the Republic today. Mr. Speaker, what is this House supposed to do? Therefore, I want to say that given my short experience in the time that I've been a senator for Nairobi, I strongly suggest and I very strongly urge members of this House to support these amendments. Mr. Speaker, there was an incident I've never forgotten where one of the committees imposed the fine that is currently on the books of 500,000 shillings. And a governor asked our committee clerk, does the committee have a pay bill number or a till number? Because the amount imposed is so minimal, it can fit on your M-Pesa account. So, money for them is not a problem. They would rather ignore summons of the House and summons of the committees and then ask the committee, who is your treasurer? Where can I send this money? What is the M-Pesa number? So for Senator Osotsi to propose that this fine be enhanced to at least 2 million shillings, I think this is something that is welcome and we must all support. Mr. Speaker, we have also struggled with this question of arrest. And I heard Senator Boni asking how should we facilitate this arrest. In fact, Mr. Speaker, for as long as this House and the institution of Parliament relies on any other governmental agency or institution to make sure that its business goes on, it will never happen. We need this institution to have the powers to be able to arrest these people, to arrest and present witnesses before the committees. And I am in support fully of the proposition by Senator Osotsi to give this House those powers. Mr. Speaker, these are powers that I know you will exercise judiciously. You will not be doing the Kamata Friday that we have seen other agencies doing. This will be specifically... Mr. Speaker, protect me.
Order,
Protect me.
order, senators. Proceed, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, I trust that the House will exercise these powers judiciously and that it will only be for purposes of making sure that people appear before our committees, and especially where we have failed to secure that attendance. Mr. Speaker, there's also a very interesting proposal here. If you look at clause 4, subsection 7, I think Senator Osotsi here wanted that this institution of Parliament should also have its own holding cells. Because you can see, Mr. Speaker, at 7A, he said that a person arrested under subsection 3 shall be held at such a place as specified in the National Police Service Act, or as shall be designated by the clerk for purposes of holding such persons. So, Mr. Speaker, you can find a nice place with tea and mandazi for them to chill there as they wait to appear before the committee. But at least they will be within the possession of the institution of Parliament. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to speak to the fine that has been proposed to be imposed under subsection 5 of the amendment. Mr. Speaker, also enhancing the fine to 2 million shillings for specific conduct during the appearance of a witness before a committee. Mr. Speaker, there's one time, and members of the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, the CPAC committee, can bear me witness. A governor appeared before us, and when our chairman, the most honorable senator for Homa Bay, Moses Kajwang, asked the governor to take oath, he had the audacity to ask the committee, under which law are you asking me to take oath? Before, of course, we went ahead to educate him that that is a constitutional requirement when you are appearing before this House or before a committee of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, Senator Osotsi has gone further than the Constitution to impose a fine to those who refuse to take oath before committees, because we have seen attempts and even others refusing to take oath for whatever reason, because we would want that the evidence that is given to the House or to the committee be evidence under oath. Number 2, he has proposed a fine for those who refuse to remain until the end, because these people are always busier than Parliament. They will appear before you and tell the chairman, we only have 1 hour, I have a flight to South Africa because it's my birthday. Mr. Speaker, the sort of contempt that we are being subjected to in the committees must stop. So this particular section, Senator Osotsi, as the chairperson of PIC, will be able to hold those witnesses there until he releases them, until he has answered all the questions that he has asked to appear to answer. Number 3, there are those who give dodgy answers. You ask a question and you can see the governor or the entity is dodging the question. Mr. Speaker, what we must do is to find these people who want to reduce the institution of Parliament to something of a joke. And then, Mr. Speaker, lastly, there is an amendment. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if there's a problem with the AC in the House, because I can see my lady colleagues.
Sergeant at Arms.
I don't know if it is me or it's because it's Ash Wednesday.
Kindly.
I think
Order.
it's because...
Order, senators. Certainly, Senator Gloria is uncomfortable. Kindly put on the AC. Can you switch on the AC, please? Order.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's because it's Ash Wednesday, a very important day of the calendar.
Order.
I'm not aware of any
Senator
other.
Gloria.
Lastly, Mr. Speaker, witnesses who fail to produce documents We have had instances before the Public Accounts Committee where an entity, the accounting officer of an entity will show up to a committee and just refuse to produce documentation that has already been requested formally and way ahead of time. So, Mr. Speaker, as I finish, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I hope our colleagues see that these are not frustrations that are shared only on the minority side, because we are all in these committees, we have experienced all of these things, and there is no other way to give this House teeth and to make sure that we are able to execute our mandate than to tie up these loose ends that will ensure that we are able to do our jobs effectively. Mr. Speaker, I second.
Honourable Senators, I will proceed to propose the question that the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 37 on 2023, be now read a second time. I will, at this juncture, allow intervention from senators, so if you're interested in making a contribution, you need to key in. Senator Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, Article 125 of the Constitution gives the House powers equivalent to that of the High Court. And what happens with the High Court, first of all, you can be contempt of court. There can be contempt of court at the High Court. But when you are contemptuous of the High Court, then the judge has powers to order the orderlies who are there within court to arrest that particular person before the court, or be sought by police and be brought before the court. And if they don't purge the contempt, then they are actually committed, either 6 months or as the judge could decide. And then when you compare that with the House, again, we are able to compare our production of documents and to issue commission or request to examine witnesses abroad. That can still be done by this House. Mr. Speaker, the difficulty we are confronted with is one whereby the police are not willing to do their job or are unable to find this particular person to present them before the House, or if they find them, we don't have enough teeth to bite, and I believe this is what Honorable Tsotsi is seeking. The enhancement of the fines is good, but Mr. Speaker, we need to have more teeth than just a fine. Now that we are equivalent to the High Court in terms of the powers the committees or this House exercises. And Mr. Speaker, although this may not exactly fall under this particular act we are trying to amend, probably could also come under Parliamentary Service Commission Act. Mr. Speaker, for these particular purposes, and now that we are dealing with the devolution, and the money is involved, serious money, and most probably, from the recommendations of Parliament, a governor or an officer in the county government can be prosecuted. So Mr. Speaker, in my own opinion, and I think if Senator Osotsi finds it good, or any of us, we can amend it further to enhance the powers we have in such a way that the wing we have for security can also be enhanced in a way that the Speaker can be able to order our own police, so that either sergeant at arms or the police officer who work with us. Of course, if it's a police officer, obviously it goes directly to the Inspector General. But we could also summon the Inspector General. And one of the things the House can do is to move proceedings against that particular officer, including impeachment. Although now impeachment goes into a different realm of the Constitution, probably the Constitution is tied into this. And these are some of the proposals we need to have, so that if a governor is contemptuous of this House, then it is equivalent to them being contemptuous of their own duties in their respective counties. And something akin to impeachment could be useful, so that a governor knows if he is summoned and is uncooperated, is not cooperating, is a hostile witness, then this House can find him not fit to hold office, and probably the House can convene itself on a trial within a trial, and impeachment proceedings ensue to this particular governor, whether they have been found by the police or not, and this House then could pass such a sentence. I think in such a way that will have teeth enough to bite. But that means probably amendment of the Constitution, probably amendment of other acts like Parliamentary Service Commission, so that we have a police wing under the command of the Speaker of the Senate or the Speaker of the National Assembly. And that then gives us power directly to be able to deal with the matter. So in the next amendment of the Constitution, this could be good. But for now, for the purposes of this debate and what we have before us, then the fine is appropriate. But we need to have powers to be able to commit into some contempt, just like the High Court. And that can only be in a direction of an impeachment proceedings or something similar to that, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, we'll keep on summoning people. They'll keep on appearing and become uncooperative. Then the committee will be as good as useless if it cannot extract enough information to be able to propose prosecution of that particular officer. Prosecution is also good in this regards, that if a governor then is sent to jail, then automatically have to vacate office depending on the number of years they've been jailed and their absence from their office. So I believe from the Constitution we made in 2010, there is a lot more, Mr. Speaker, we can be able to do so that we can make devolution effective, and especially the discipline of governors. And most probably any other process of dealing with the governors is much longer, is frustrating, and the sure way if this House has more teeth to bite other than what we have in Article 125, or in future considerations of amendment of the Constitution, we could make Article 125 more effective, and that we could be able now to effect what is similar to contempt of the House or contempt of court in accordance with Article 25. So I do support Honorable Tsotsi and think that we need to amend, to make further amendments to add more teeth so that this House can be effective, and that when we summon a governor will appear even 15 minutes before the appointed time for fear of what may happen the moment they appear before the House. I do support and recommend that we should be working on further amendments at third reading. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Cherarke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Happy New Year, and it's good to have you back on the seat. Madam Speaker, I want to congratulate Senator Otsotsi. I think he's starting a year with a bang. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I agree. You know, him being the chair of CPIC is proposing very important, and it will spur accountability committees, Madam Speaker. Senator Otsotsi being the chair of PIC and my neighbor from where we come from, this is a very good proposal. This is a bipartisan proposal, and I think all of us should support. It will make our work very easier and efficient. The Speaker, I've met Senator Otsotsi chairing one of his committee sessions on a lighter touch. Madam Speaker, Otsotsi is proposing tough questions, but when clients appear before him, he's always very kind. But I know that's a story. We can always have a conversation with him. Madam Speaker, this amendment is very important. I think all of us agree that Parliament, it enjoys the same status as the High Court because of quasi-judicial powers that we have. Article 125 to ensure we have effectiveness, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the issue of raising fine for any people who violates Powers and Privileges Act or fails to appear as a witness before any committee of 2 million, I think it is too little money. With the economic times that we are facing, we should be upgrading it to 5 million so that people can feel the pain. Our agenda is to inflict the pain in courts to ensure that it becomes so painful that when you hear you need to appear before a committee of parliament of the Republic of Kenya, you shudder with morbid fear so that you appear, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that is the love we should share with people who don't want to appear before parliament, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and therefore, when it comes to third reading, I think we need to enhance, and I am proposing, I know the Powers and Privileges as already elaborated, Madam Speaker, is we ensure, Madam Speaker, we recover, you must prove that it is from your own resources, from your own money. In fact, we should have an affidavit to that effect to say if witness X is paying 5 million, it should be proven that it is from your own personal money. Because we know in this country, Madam Speaker, there is an appetite towards misuse and abuse of public resources, Madam Speaker. So when you are being fined by the committee, it must be shown that the 5 million or 2 million you paid before the committee through our clerk, you must own each and every cent so that we fight corruption where it matters, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my only concern is on clause 3. We should also propose, I don't know what we can think with this, Madam Speaker, is if we have an agency like Embakasi car's explosion that happened, should we wait for 7 days for the witness to appear? If it is something that is urgent like COVID pandemic, should we wait for 7 days to have that person? Why don't we make a provision, and I don't know when it comes to third reading, where we create an exception, an exemption, that when an agency happens in the country like floods, other things, Madam Speaker, that is, cannot be intervened, with that witness should be appear as soon as possible. Where you, Madam Speaker, you can order a house to go to a recess and invite that witness to appear immediately if there is a matter that becomes an urgent, Madam Speaker. Speaker, I propose that we also create our own parliamentary police unit, just like anti-stock theft police unit, Madam Speaker, ATPU. You know, anti-stock theft police unit deals with cattle rustlers and bandits. We must in equal measure deal with these bandits of the law, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I'm proposing, and it is good the commissioner is here in the house, one of the senior counsel, Okongo Mugeni, is here. We can, under Judicial Service Commission and in partnership with National Police Service Commission, to create a parliamentary police unit, so that the clerk and the speaker can direct our own police unit to go and frog march those people who are violating the Constitution, Madam Speaker. And we will create a committee to oversee, and I'll propose at that point to be the chair of such committee, Madam Speaker, because it is like working in traffic police department in police, Madam Speaker, police service. So what we are proposing is that let us have a police unit, Madam Speaker, that only is domiciled within Parliament of the Republic of Kenya. The other day, Madam Speaker, I saw the Cabinet Secretary form a police unit to fight against coffee, or was it against rice theft and some other things. So these are things that we can discuss so that our clerk and you, the speaker, you can give directions to such officers to go and frog march, Madam Speaker, so that we can see. Madam Speaker, at that point I wanted to make, of course this has been indicated as a civil debt, Madam Speaker. We need to ensure, Madam Speaker, I agree with Senator of Nairobi as one of the powerful vice chairs of county public accounts. We have had run-in with some of the witnesses, Madam Speaker, who come and refuse to talk. They don't want to produce documents. They become condescending. I remember a governor, I don't want to name, because comes from my side of coalition, made condescending remarks against our chair, our esteemed, God-fearing chair, Madam Speaker, and it was embarrassing because We expected, and to make the matters worse, is a former member of this House. So sometimes we find it cantankerous, and unfortunately, Madam Speaker, that people come to committee, they don't want to produce documents, they don't want to be civil, they don't want to be patient. There is one governor, and I hope the ODM Secretary General is listening, I don't want to name him. He wanted us to quickly summarize the appearances because he was flying to India, Madam Speaker. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing as a committee, and I'm happy the leader of minority, Senator Matsai, who is a former judge, retired, should be aware that these are the problems we are facing in committees. Madam Speaker, we should allow our committees, when we tell a witness to produce a document, we are not doing it for the sake of Senate. Maybe you want to see the expenditure of Focha of Dandora Stadium in Nairobi. We would want to know who was paid. What was the company, for example? What happened in Embakasi cars explosion, Madam Speaker? Who did not do their job? Who neglected their job? That is the future of the Kenya we want, Madam Speaker. The fourth point, Madam Speaker, I want to make is when we visit your county, like Busia or Kakamega or Mandera or Kilifi or Kitui, Madam Speaker. And it is good the next governor of Kitui is here with us, Mheshimiwa Enoch Wambua, Madam Speaker. When we decide to visit a project, Madam Speaker, there is always a sabotage against our committees. I would have expected Senator Utsosi to add something, because governors and other entities are mischievous. They will ensure when you want to visit a project, they will tell you the road is not accessible, the security is not good. I remember when a committee of labor wanted to meet the victims of first choice fraud in Eldoret. They were called at somewhere called Ahero, Awasi, that you cannot proceed to Eldoret, your security is not assured. Madam Speaker, where are we headed as a country? We have seen where Parliament can visit even Ukraine, where the bombs are flying left, right, and center. But you are being told, don't go to a certain place to investigate, at the security is not assured, Madam Speaker. I remember, and Senator Chute can bear me witness, I don't know where he is, and a number of members of Trade Committee. I don't know Trade Committee, I think Trade Committee, the chair is here, Senator Seki. They were visiting ICDC to check on the issue of edible oils. The CEO decided not to cooperate at all. In fact, they ensured the committee does not visit and see, and yet it was a committee that should have visited that place, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm proposing through Senator Utsosi, when it comes to third reading or during the amendment stage, we should say something about witnesses or entities who do not allow Parliament to access the premises to assess the situation. For example, if the Committee of Energy wants to visit Embakasi, we don't want any entity to prevent or to become stumbling block for a committee to function properly, Madam Speaker. So let us not have a conversation, Madam Speaker, of looking at the witness appearing before our committee. Let us also have a way, we should even say, if a witness or a governor or anybody prevents a committee from accessing a site of interest of the committee in their course of committee work, we should also ensure we fine them 5 million Kenya shillings, Madam Speaker. I think that would be very important, Madam Speaker. And then, but finally, we should also find a way of doing mental assessment of some of the witnesses, Madam Speaker. Because I was sitting in another committee, Madam Speaker, and the witness started wailing, and the members ran away, Madam Speaker. So we should also find a way of looking at the aptitude or the mental stability of some of the witnesses, Madam Speaker. I don't know what we can do, because some witnesses can pledge lucid moments, or they were not aware of what was happening, Madam Speaker. By all instances, I think this is a good bill, Madam Speaker, because this is a straightforward bill. I don't want to belabor the point, and I know most of my colleagues want to say something, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy my brother, Senator Oburu Odinga, is here, and Happy New Year. And I'm told you are still a young child, so Madam Speaker, I heard him saying something like that, and it's good to see him well and alive and smiling, Madam Speaker. With those many remarks, I support this bill, and let us process quickly for our committees to function efficiently and effectively. I thank you.
Senator Wambua.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, from the onset, I stand in full support of this bill. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I will also seek your protection from my colleagues. Madam Speaker, yesterday in one of the committee meetings, I am told the senator for Kisumu addressed my governor to the effect that he should prepare the books properly so that when Senator Wambua becomes the next governor, then things in Kitui are not very bad. Now, Madam Speaker, today you've had Senator Cheragay, my friend, referring to me as the next governor of Kitui County. Madam Speaker, I want to go on record and say, at the fullness of God's timing, the people of Kitui County will decide what they want. And when they make that decision, then we can only follow. Today we are here, Madam Speaker, to prosecute serious business on a very serious matter. And I want to thank Senator, my brother, my friend, the senator from Vihiga, Godfrey Ososi, for coming up with such a bill. Madam Speaker, I say I congratulate him because a lot of us are victims of great mischief. And Madam Speaker, we have had experiences that border on gross impunity from both the national executive and the executives of our county governments. Now, Speaker, I would want to narrate a situation that I found myself in when we came back to the Senate in the year 2022. Madam Speaker, it will be remembered that around October of 2022, this country was undergoing serious drought. And Madam Speaker, around that time, I raised a statement on the floor of this House on the drought mitigation measures that the Ministry of Agriculture was undertaking to save our people from imminent death out of starvation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, 1 year down the line, up to around October 2023, the Minister for Agriculture had declined invitations, summons from the Agriculture Committee, and my statement was still pending, awaiting a response from the CS in November of 2023, at a time that we were experiencing serious rainfall across the country. So, Madam Speaker, one day I'm told that the minister is now coming to respond to my question, my statement 1 year later, and the circumstances had completely changed. Madam Speaker, I said I was not going to aid the Cabinet Secretary to insult my intelligence. And so I dropped that statement and withdrew my interest in it. Madam Speaker, these are the things that are making Senator Ososi think through the pain and the tribulation that committees of the Senate have endured from the executives, both at the national government and at the county levels. Madam Speaker, I like the proposal, though I saw a few of my colleagues smiling suggestively on this proposal that the Speaker and the clerk could effect the arrest. Madam Speaker, come to think of it, in most cases, our police service has either been unwilling or unable to take firm decisions against senior members of the executive. Madam Speaker, there is a proposal that has been brought on the floor, and that's what the one I want to prosecute, that maybe it is high time that the Parliamentary Service Commission, through this bill, thinks very seriously about the establishment of a parliamentary police service. Because, Madam Speaker, the import of the arrests being proposed by Senator Osotsi is not necessarily for the presentation of the arrested persons before courts. They are supposed to be arrested and presented either in plenary or in committees. And so, Madam Speaker, the power to arrest and present the arrested persons before committees of parliament or in plenary should surely rest with a service that is answerable to parliament, not answerable to the same executive that is being followed up. And Madam Speaker, even as we talk about the power to arrest by the parliamentary police service that we are proposing, Madam Speaker, I would go further. Maybe you should propose these amendments in that reading. That, in fact, the security of members should be provided by officers from the parliamentary police service. Because this thing, Madam Speaker, of having to beg the executive, the National Police Service, to provide members with security, and they decide to withdraw them at will, Madam Speaker, that is not even sustainable. So if we had a parliamentary police service, which is properly equipped and properly trained on public relations, I'm seeing a situation where, Madam Speaker, for example, if they want to go and arrest the governor of Nairobi, my friend, Governor Sakaja, and I'm not saying that they should arrest him, they will use the demeanor of an elite squad. In Swahili, they would say, naomba nikushike. You know, they will be humane. They will know how to deal with VIPs. As opposed to the current situation, Mr. Speaker, where the discretion of whether to be... Madam Speaker, I need your protection from Senator Shakila.
Order Senator Shakila and Senator Hezena. Can we listen, please?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I'm saying you didn't even know whether maybe Senator Shakila is rejoicing that a senator is doing a good job on the floor, or she is discussing other things, but I'm happy for your protection, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, in conclusion, there is an amendment that I will ask my brother to consider in that reading. You know, that's in clause 6. That where an order of arrest is to be effected by an officer of a House of Parliament, the Inspector General shall facilitate the arrest as may be required by the clerk. Madam Speaker, remember in the first place, the reason why Parliament is effecting the arrest is because the IG is either unwilling or unable to effect that arrest. So it should not be the same person that we resort to effect the arrest through Parliament. So my proposal would be that we leave the Inspector General of Police completely out of this arrangement, so that, and the arrest should be purposeful. As I said, we are not arresting governors, we are not arresting cabinet secretaries to present them before a court of law. We are arresting them to present them before committees of Parliament or in the plenary of the Senate. Madam Speaker, with those many remarks, I do support.
Senator Oruova.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this bill by Senator Osotsi, Madam Speaker. I have been in the Senate for about maybe 17 months, and I have seen how we struggle as legislators to play our role in oversight. I have seen how we literally are sent by the people who put us in these positions to hold accountable certain offices, and we are unable, because the most we can do is prepare a statement, move a bill, raise a question, but at the end of the day, even these offices that we are playing oversight are unable to take us seriously, because what is the worst that we can do as a house, well, maybe we can propose something that should be implemented, or we can, create a bill that will take another 2 years to be assented into law. And sometimes it's very, very, very frustrating. Madam Speaker, in a time like now, where as women of this country, we are literally wondering where we are going to cry, Madam Speaker. We are wondering what we are going to do. People are asking us, what are you doing in Parliament? What kind of laws are you pushing in Parliament? But Madam Speaker, you cannot legislate good behavior if you do not have the tools to be able to do this, Madam Speaker. For instance, we have seen the cases of femicide, Madam Speaker, rising. Why? Because there are no repercussions. Because people think there's nothing that can be done. After all, even if I'm taken to remand, I'll be given a cash bail, I will come out, I will prolong the process in the judiciary, and all these, tactics that are being used. Madam Speaker, a clear example is when we call upon a certain state agency, an officer of a state department, a minister, someone in authority who has the tools to actually make the changes that we need in that space to safeguard women, and they simply say that they are unavailable. Madam Speaker, I am looking forward to understand this bill further. I know Senator Ososi said that, we can be able to, once this bill passes and it is assented, we can be able to make arrests, Madam Speaker. But I want to ask that while we are looking into that amendment, for instance, in this issue of the femicide that we are talking about, a particular example, when we had that man called Matara, who had been reported severally, 3 or 4 cases had been put out at the gender desk, Madam Speaker. As a house that plays oversight, that safeguards Kenyans, and particularly women, we should be able at one point to say, hey, listen, we are not only writing a letter to ask the IG to come here so that we can ask him, what is the gender desk about? We should be able to reach a point where, if we are not getting the proper answers, if we are not being given, or if we are not being told what is not happening in those departments, we should be able as a house to say, okay, because there's no clarity on this matter, because the certain officer that requires to give clarity is not available, by all means, Madam Speaker, we should have the powers to arrest that person, bring them to account to this house, and if by all means force that we get some explanations, Madam Speaker. I am looking forward to the day when we are not only raising statements here, and the statements are being forwarded to the committees, and the committees are negotiating with the ministries or the state departments or the agencies. I'm looking forward to the day when, even when a statement is raised regarding a department, an office, a ministry, an agency that you hold and you are responsible as an accounting officer in government, Madam Speaker, that you will be trembling because the Senate has summoned you to come and tell Kenyans what is happening, Madam Speaker. Until that day comes, we are going to just be talking and talking and talking and begging that the upper house is given the powers, and the impact of our work will be very, very minimal, Madam Speaker. This particular day, I would like, if I was in the committee of security, I would have summoned the IG. We cannot be allowing our women and girls to be demonstrating on the streets of Nairobi when us as legislators, we have no powers to summon those officers that be and ask them what is happening. Why aren't all these criminals who are killing our women being arrested? Why aren't we seeing any convictions? Why aren't we seeing any movement in terms of the change that we are legislating in this house, Madam Speaker? There should be a provision in this amendment bill, and I want to sit down with Senator Osotsi after this session and ask him, what happens when the person in question is the IG? Can we arrest him? What happens? Because, Madam Speaker, we are tired. We are tired as women. We are knocking in every single office. We are going to that office, to this ministry, to what? And at the end of the day, people are looking at us in this house here wondering, Ruoba, we sent you there to fight for women. Our women are dying. And you are just giving us statements, summoning people to the house, calling I don't know which committee. Kenyans do not care about the bureaucratic processes that we have here. Kenyans want to see us in action. So I must support this bill because at this point, Madam Speaker, and I don't want to sound drunk in power, I would really like to have powers to arrest these men who are killing our women and are finding all these legal loopholes to maneuver the judicial system. I want to have powers as the senator who was nominated to represent women to stand in this house and say that we must summon the IG, we must summon the head of the gender desk. And if they are not interested to come and discuss those issues with us, we must be able to arrest them. So, Madam Speaker, in this particular bill, which is talking about amending, I know Senator Dulo is wondering whether we are discussing gender. We are discussing a bill about empowering this house, the upper house, to be able to play oversight to an extent that people tremble, the authorities that be tremble. When they are being summoned to be told why are Kenyans dying, they will understand that we mean serious business. Madam Speaker, I'm very sad, by the way, on this day. It's just that I am gathering all the courage to make sure that I represent the people who sent me here well. Madam Speaker, we are tired of demonstrations. We are tired of writing statements. We are getting even tired to legislate further legislation, because how much longer we will legislate and legislate and legislate, but if this legislation is not being implemented, Madam Speaker, we will end up with the best laws, the best policies, the best human resource, 67 senators sitting in the upper house with no tools and no power to be able to say to an individual in a state agency that, listen, the work you're supposed to do, you are not doing. So therefore, Madam Speaker, as I support this bill by Senator Osotsi, I am asking Senator Osotsi, think through it. Because the matters that are affecting women require that even this bill must give us some sort of power, authority to be able to arrest the IG, the head of the gender department, if they are not willing to protect our women, if they are not willing to implement the laws that are there. We want this bill not only to cover that we are arresting ministers because they did not come to committees. We want this bill to reflect on the representation of people and particularly women out there, Madam Speaker. So, therefore, I support this bill. And being a Black Valentine's Day, Madam Speaker, you see we are in black and red. And we are very sad about everything that is happening to our women in Kenya. As I support this bill, I want to say this. We work hard as legislators, but the people might not understand the bureaucratic processes of playing oversight. So this is an important tool that we require as the upper house to be able to have an impact down to the grassroots level. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support.
Honorable members, I have a communication. Honorable Senators, in the public gallery, we have 52 students accompanied by 3 teachers from Othaya Boys in Nyeri County who are undertaking an education visit in the Senate. In our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. I'd like to, I can't see the Honorable Senator from Nyeri. I think I request Senator Nyamu to welcome them in the Senate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you, students from Othaya Primary or High School. And most importantly, may you get inspired to go for your dreams and may you challenge yourselves that you can also be in this house one day. Your senator, I wish he was here so that you can also get to hear from somebody who is from home. But I would wish you to dream, any dream. Everything is possible. Don't limit yourself. Don't question yourself. Don't second guess a dream that you have or that comes to you. So we hope this session will be very inspiring to you as much as it will be a learning one. And karibuni sana. Thank you.
Senator Ledame.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in less than 5 minutes, I rise to support this amendment to the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act. Madam Speaker, respect to Parliament is something which is paramount. And any attempt to disregard summons, that is a constant thing for both the executive, is a clear undermining of this legislative arm of government. The senator from Vihiga thought it wise, and I just want to remind him that this is a matter that must be supported by both sides of the divide. It must be supported because even in the name of the bill, it is parliamentary powers and privileges. Madam Speaker, if you look at Article 125 of the Constitution, it is quite clear. It gives either House of Parliament, committees, the same powers as a High Court. I've heard my colleagues talk about giving Parliament the power to arrest, but I hold a different view. I think that power to arrest has to remain with the police because that's what the Constitution defines. The only thing that I would request is that in this bill, and I hope that my brother, Senator from Vihiga, can amend the section where he's talking about, in his amendment, section 19.5, where he's 7, where he says a person arrested under subsection 3 shall be held at a place specified in the National Police Service Act, or shall be designed by the clerk for the purpose of holding such a person. I don't believe we should invite ourselves to the work of the police. I think the police should be able to do their work. There is a clear separation of powers between the three arms of government. Ours is to call for the respect of this august House. Madam Speaker, when the framers of the Constitution defined Article 125, it's because they clearly understood that once you are summoned to appear before this House as a witness and fail to appear, the framers of the Constitution knew it, that the executive arm of government, which wants to enjoy a cordial relationship with this other arm of government, will facilitate to ensure that you are arrested and you are compelled to appear before that House. One of the things that I support in this amendment is the fact that the fines are being increased from $500,000 to $2 million. Madam Speaker, when I was a member of the Parliament of PAC, by then it was both PAC and PIC, we did exercise Section 19 of the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges, which my brother is now seeking to amend. And we compelled 2 governors. I know the former governor of Kitui, Charity Ngilu, paid $500,000. I know we also compelled the former governor of
Taita Taveta, not Taita Taveta, but Kwale to pay 200,000. And by then, it was very clear, because I've seen the amendment here, and I don't know whether it was mistyped or something, that these funds are not from the public offer, but from the personal's account. So whether we want to reiterate that in this amendment, it is something for us to think about. But I think the most important thing that we have to put clear here to the public is for them to know and to understand that it is not that we just want to have so many privileges. In fact, I don't understand what is privilege about this amendment. It is because we want to ensure a fiduciary duty. Madam Speaker, every citizen of this country has got the legal obligation to ensure that they respect the three arms of government. We have been having a serious problem. This morning, Madam Speaker, while we were busy prosecuting other business here, we excused ourselves, through the permission of the Speaker, to be able to go and interrogate the Cabinet Secretary of Energy on the recent occurrences in Embakasi. But that Cabinet Secretary failed to appear. He failed to appear because maybe the way our laws are drafted, it makes it easy for him to be invited. You know, you can be invited, you send a letter, and then you are invited again. And then the third time is when the committee now sits and says, we've invited this witness 3 times and they have failed to appear. Now we are going to summon. I'm quite happy with the new amendment which is being introduced in this bill, which is 5B, which I hope my brother, Senator from Nandi, was here, that it says that despite subsection 5A, the relevant house or its committee may require a person to appear before it within a shorter period of time, as it may determine, taking into account the urgency of the matter before the House of Committee or committee. Madam Speaker, I'd like to beseech my brother to change, to remove that may and to make it shall. Because on this occasion today, we had the honorable member from Embakasi coming there, and you could see the gentleman was shaken. He was feeling, he was carrying the pain of the citizens of Embakasi, saying that there are people who are in hospital, the bills are skyrocketing in both public and private hospital. But the Cabinet Secretary and my friend Kipto decided they shall go and have their own meetings and decide not to appear. I think it's about time, Madam Speaker, as I end. It's about time that we now truly become our brother's keepers. We now really try to ask ourselves, what are we going to be reminded, or how are we going to be remembered when our time in this world comes to an end? It is time that we as legislators and also as citizens of this country, both in the judiciary, the legislative arm of government, and the executive, to remember that whatever we are doing here, it is not for us to carry to our graves, but for us to be able to leave this country a better place than we found it. And the only way to do it is to ensure that we adhere strictly to the rule of law. So I support the amendments. I plead with my brother to make sure that he corrects a few things, and to emphasize one thing, that the subpoenas or the summons of witnesses, whenever a witness receives that summon, that's a legal document that carries serious consequences. And if they fail to appear, in fact, one thing you should include here is that where a witness fails to appear more than once, and they are forced to pay the fine, the next thing that should happen is for this House to censure that witness. That is the only time that this Parliament will be taken seriously. I love the way we started business this session. I hope that we can, deal with things in a bipartisan manner so that we leave this country a better place than we found it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Khalwale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this amendment bill strongly. I know the chair of PIC, like the chairs of all oversight committees, there's a lot of frustration when you expect witnesses to come and they don't come. But Madam Speaker, as I support the amendment bill, I want to remind colleagues that one of the biggest frustrations is for us to legislate, the president gives assent, and then when the bill is challenged in a court of law, it is declared unconstitutional. Be careful about this amendment. Senator Osotsi, I urge you to reflect on this amendment, because what you're asking for, you're already given in 125 of the Constitution. It tells you in 125, my brother, that you have the power, A, to enforce the attendance of witnesses and examine them on oath, affirmation, or otherwise, and B, to compel the production of documents, and C, to issue a commission or a request to examine witnesses abroad. The Constitution has given you more than even what you're asking for. What's more, Senator Osotsi, as I request you to reflect on your amendment, I want to invite you to the establishment of the security organs in this Constitution, which says in 238 that our security organs are the national security, are the Kenya Police, the National Intelligence Service, and the Kenya Defense Forces. As you reflect, this Constitution is telling you that the Inspector General of the police cannot be directed by any person in respect of inspection of any particular offense or offenses, in respect of the enforcement of the law against any particular person or persons, and C, employment, forget about it. Why I'm drawing your attention to this is that several members have proposed that we establish the likes of the anti-stock unit, we establish a parliamentary police force. This will fall in the High Court because the Constitution does not anticipate that we can form a parallel police force in this parliament. Yes, you can request in our standing orders that we allow, or rather, we request the Inspector General to deploy police officers here. But we cannot command them. That is the Constitution. So, to expect us to support you so that then we go and be embarrassed in court where we shall be reminded that we have no power to establish a parallel police force is asking for too much. Reflect on it. We are supporting you, but with due respect, you are walking a path that we shall not succeed. Madam Speaker, there is wisdom in this amendment where we want to enhance the pain through fines and what have you. That is a route we can pursue. But to pursue the possibility of us creating a police force, you're also saying that judges, upon being frustrated, should also establish a parallel police force for themselves. That is the kind of thing that this Constitution of ours does not anticipate. That if the president, for example, and his cabinet secretaries wanted a more efficient police force, they move away from the National Police Service and establish their own parallel police force. We would no longer be having a government that sits on the three legs of separation of powers. That is the contribution I wanted to give you, with a lot of respect, because I have sat in that chair where you are today as chair for many, many years, both in this House and in the National Assembly, and I know the frustration you're going through. The Americans call it hyper focus. It's not enough just to focus, but to hyper focus. I support, Madam Speaker.
Senator Mogeni.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I begin by thanking the sponsor of this bill, Senator Ososi, for bringing what I perceive, and I beg to differ with Senator Halwale, what I perceive to be a very important amendment to the Powers and Privileges Act. Madam Speaker, every organization annually does audit its activities and look at its strengths, its weaknesses, what opportunities it has, and the threats it faces in executing its mandate. And Mr. Speaker, this proposed amendment to the Power and Privileges Bill is actually a response to the weaknesses and the threats we face as our House in enforcing the powers conferred on this House by Article 125 of the Constitution. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to plead, and I hope by the end of this debate, Senator Halwale will be persuaded that this bill does not contain any provision that we can deem to be unconstitutional. In fact, what it does, Madam Speaker, is to give teeth to the provisions of Article 125 of the Constitution. Because, Madam Speaker, you cannot have powers to someone but lack the mechanisms to enforce. That will be a weakness in itself. So if we were to, Madam Speaker, identify and analyze the weaknesses that we face as a body that is supposed to provide checks and balances, then clearly the fact that we cannot arrest a person who has willfully refused to appear before us will emerge as a weakness. And we must do something, Madam Speaker, to respond, to fill that gap. Madam Speaker, if it can be of comfort to Senator Halwale, we had a debate like this when I served as the chair of Ethics and Anti-Corruption, Madam Speaker, because we had powers to conduct investigations, but we did not have powers to arrest, Madam Speaker. And we debated for a long time, looking for a solution. And finally, Madam Speaker, we made a conclusion that the best thing that will enhance the powers of EACC to summon a witness is to have a police station gazetted, and once you summon a witness, if he doesn't come, you go arrest, come and lock them up. And the Inspector General of Police gazetted Integrity Center as a police station. That does not fall under the security arms or the National Police Services we have read under the Constitution, but under Chapter 6, EACC, as a police station, gazetted by the Inspector General of Police. And they can summon you if you don't appear, they can come for you and lock you up at EACC. So, Madam Speaker, this bill responds to an initiative by this House to ensure that when we truly want to conduct an investigation, if we want to effect the powers that we have that have been conferred upon us by Article 125, then we must run the full course, Madam Speaker. And I want to remind Senator Halwale that even the institution you have cited, called the High Court, that other arm, that other independent arm, has powers to send its officers to pick you up and present you before the courts. If you are failing a civil debt and the court's order for you to be arrested for a civil debt, court bailiffs can pick you up, take you before the courts for sentencing for a civil debt without the involvement of police officers. Court bailiffs have those powers. So I believe, Madam Speaker, when you read the proposed amendment to this bill, especially, I hope I'm reading section 3, subsection 4. It says that an order of arrest may be effected either by a police officer or by an authorized officer of a House of Parliament. So if you compare the exercise of those powers between the courts and us, there is nothing unconstitutional. If you read the Constitution, the chapter dealing with National Police Service, Part 4, from Article 243 all through, I believe there is a saving clause, there is a saving article, which allows Parliament to establish other police services. So we can have under Article 247, which says Parliament may enact a legislation establishing other police services, provided it's under the supervision of the National Police Service. So we can have a force that is called Parliamentary Police Service under the employment of the Parliamentary Service Commission, but under the supervision of the National Police Service. Mr. Speaker, we should also borrow from other jurisdictions. The US Senate has powers to summon witnesses. They call it the subpoena powers. But the consequences are dire, Senator Halwale. If you don't respond or adhere to the summons issued by the Senate of the United States of America, you will face dire consequences. In fact, Madam Speaker, the fine, if you convert to the Kenyan, using the Kenyan exchange, the shilling to the dollar, the fine for the US Senate is $100,000 US. That's equivalent to 15 million. What we are proposing here is 2 million. Then, if you don't comply, the Senate has even what they call criminal contempt power of Congress. If you don't respond, they can convict you and they can sentence you to a maximum of 12 months. Not less than 4, not more than 12. If you remember, in 1982, there was a lady who was serving under Ronald Reagan. I think she was called Ann Gorsuch. She was under the Environmental Authority under Reagan. She was summoned to appear before Congress to produce certain documents. She declined. But when she was pushed further, and when she faced the criminal contempt proceedings of Senate, she not only produced the documents, but she opted to resign. She quit. The case of Nixon, Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was required to produce some tapes that were in the custody of White House, and he refused. In fact, he filed a reference to the Supreme Court, citing presidential privilege. But the Supreme Court of America sided with the Senate and ordered him to produce the document. So, Madam Speaker, if we have to elevate the stature and the powers of this House, Madam Speaker, we must enhance the punishment not only to give a fine, but to also have power to convict. We can learn from other jurisdictions. Just last year, if you follow international news, an officer that was serving under former President, I believe Trump, was he called Cannon? I think that, yes, Cannon, was convicted by a Senate and sentenced to 4 months just for failure to appear before the Senate. So, Madam Speaker, if we really need to have a house that can fully hold other government institutions to account, then we should support this bill. And as I've said, Article 247 gives us legislative power to create another police service, which we can name Parliamentary Police Service. Madam Speaker, so I fully thank Senator Ososi for originating this bill. And this will be a game changer, Madam Speaker. Even current, Madam Speaker, we are going through the budget policy statement. And if you look at the columns there, the government is asking us, what were your objectives? What did you want to attain as a Senate? And you will say there, you know, we wanted, in response to maybe statements or in furtherance of our powers to hold government accountable, we wanted to summon this number of PSS, ministers, but you will see there is a gap, you know. And as we ask for more money, Treasury is asking, why didn't you attain these goals? How come you intended to have about 20 cabinet ministers appear before you, but it seems only 14? Because we give a projection at the beginning that we intend, in furtherance of our mandate, to summon this number of ministers or cabinet secretaries, so to speak. If you don't, Madam Speaker, it appears in the budget policy statement, and you must defend. So this gives us a very good case, Madam Speaker, to advance, you know, the reasons behind this bill. Let me give you an example, Madam Speaker. When you were sitting as NADCO, and the NADCO had appointees of the president, including the majority leader from National Assembly and the majority leader from Senate, Madam Speaker, we issued summons to the 7 former commissioners of IBC to appear before NADCO, Madam Speaker. 4 responded, appeared. Madam Speaker, the former chairman and the 2 commissioners wrote a letter, a contemptuous letter, in response to the summons, and said he will not appear. And we were helpless. But look at the important task that was before that committee, appointed with the approval of the president and with the leader of official opposition. If we have these amendments in place, Madam Speaker, nobody will ever take this house for granted. Not just this house, even the National Assembly. Nobody will ever take us for granted, Madam Speaker. And if it's of any comfort, these powers that are enjoyed by the Senate of the United States of America are not in the American Constitution. They are not in the American Constitution, just in their standing orders. But they have been tested before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has agreed with the importance of Congress having powers to issue subpoena and to punish if you don't appear. So I want to request Senator Ososi to wait for my amendment, Madam Speaker, that will be proposing that other than enhancing this fine to 2 million, we also have power to punish those who willfully refuse to appear before us. That is the only way, Madam Speaker, we can now talk of a house that has powers to oversight the executive and to provide checks and balances, and that can protect devolution. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, Madam Speaker, I want us to acknowledge the fact that what Article 125 gave us was just a blanket power to summon. How we ensure that that article is meaningful to us, gives Senate the necessary powers, is by enacting the necessary legislation that makes sure that Article 125 of our Constitution has teeth. So I support this bill, and I propose that we have a bipartisan approach. We look at the interest the interest of the entire House, and not to be confined to the fact that this is a bill that has been sponsored by Senator Ososi, who is from the minority side. I plead with my colleague senators that we give this a bipartisan approach, and I assure you, Senator Halwale, many generations that will come after us will remember the third Senate as the one that really enhanced the authority and the power of this House. With those remarks, Madam Speaker, I fully support. Thank you.
Senator Mungatana.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to also make my contributions in this bill. May I start by acknowledging the work that fellow colleague, neighbor, the Honorable Ososi has put into this, and the thinking that is beyond doubt very clear, and the intention. It is good, and I want to start by saying I support it. Madam Speaker, when we were serving together in the Shakahola committee, we gave summons to the appearance of the main suspect, who was one Mackenzie, to appear before us. Madam Speaker, we were running against time. And so we issued summons directly. Madam Speaker, I want to demonstrate that sometimes police can be very difficult and fail to assist the processes of Parliament. Because when we served the Inspector General of Police to tell him to produce the person who went to effect service from Parliament, the process server, met some difficulties. And in the first instance, Madam Speaker, even the prisons officer, the Inspector General of Police, of prisons, was Director General of Prisons, was very difficult. Then on the second day, when we sat down, now we said that the person, the officer in charge of the prison, Shimolatewa prison, will be personally liable. If this person doesn't appear, there was a change, because now people realized it is person. In fact, we said it is not the Director General of Prisons, it is that person. So what the officer did, he now made access possible for the process server from Parliament to effect service on Mackenzie. The only difficulty that came now was the time schedule, because the lawyers needed more time and so on. But Madam Speaker, if we had gone through the whole process, through the Director General of Prisons in Nairobi, I don't know what, it would not have worked. Now, I am saying that committees in this House, Madam Speaker, and has been demonstrated in various arguments here, we have a difficulty in affecting the attendance of witnesses to our committees. And so, the thinking behind this amendment, Madam Speaker, I fully support it, and we must enhance the powers. And Madam Speaker, we need to do two things, which my honorable colleague Ososi has captured. We need to fine these people, and we need to attempt to effect arrest. Madam Speaker, when we talk about fining, the enhancement to 2 million is not sufficient. Madam Speaker, I would propose, and I know the figure has been given here, a figure of 5 million, but I know that if we made it to 10 million, we say just up to 10 million, so the committee can decide what is reasonable in between. If we say up to 10 million, Madam Speaker, it will enhance the seriousness of this matter. Madam Speaker, I remember when we fined the Dr. Johansen, only 500,000, he appeared and explained that it was not me. I didn't refuse to come to the committee. It was my minister who told me not to come. And Madam Speaker, we were able to then, having listened to his plea and, having been a very, very cooperative person all along, we decided to lift that. But Madam Speaker, I'm trying to drive at one point. I'm saying the amendment must be clear, not just to enhance the fine, but it has to be very clear that it is personal to the witness, so that the gravity of the thing, of the whole process is captured. Why I say so is because the amendment that is proposed in this bill says that the fine is a civil debt recoverable under summary procedure. That's what Honorable Sosi has said. And I think the sponsor of the bill needs to look at it afresh so that it is specific to the witness and it's not recoverable as a civil debt, just open like that, but recoverable from that particular witness as a debt. So that if it's a government officer, it should go even further to give power. And I hope Honorable Sosi will capture this, or if it comes at the third stage, we work with him to make it such that there is direct power ordered to attach the salaries and benefits of any officer who has been found guilty of failing to follow the instructions of the committee or of the House. So that, Madam Speaker, if we are talking about a governor and a fine of 10 million has been put, a fine of 5 million, a fine of whatever amount has been put, then there should be another provision that allows the attachment of the salary, and it should be within a certain period of time so that the gravity of this issue is captured. So on the question of fine, I think, Madam Speaker, there could be deeper thought around that whole thing so that we enhance the powers of this Senate and of the National Assembly in this act. So I fully agree with those proposals, but maybe we can enrich it. When we sit down with the Honorable Senator, we can enrich it so that we think the whole process should be such that there are no loopholes, there are no legal loopholes to allow for escape of a person who refuses to honor the summons of this House. Madam Speaker, on the question of arrest, there are two forms of arrest, and they are provided for by the Criminal Procedure Code, Cap 75 of the laws of Kenya, and the Police Act, Sections 58 of the Police Act. Madam Speaker, we must agree that the powers of arrest under our Constitution are mainly powers of police. So every time we are making proposals around the powers of arrest, the police must be involved. And Madam Speaker, there is provision in the Criminal Procedure Code, Act 75 of the laws of Kenya, that allows a private citizen to effect arrest. But what does he do with that arrest? Madam Speaker, the law itself says as soon as you arrest that person, you hand him over to the police. So again, it emphasizes